Thank you very much to the Macular Disease Society for inviting me to come along today and chat about this. And being a university lecturer, I have a PowerPoint comfort blanket. Is always handy. But I assure anybody who can't read it that I will talk through everything that's up on the screen. But for anybody who wants the backup, then it's there, and you've got a copy in your pack as well. So I just want to try and set the scene a little bit about university departments. So I'm a professor of optometry, and I'm involved in teaching undergraduate optometry students. There are 8, soon to be 9 universities in the UK that offer an undergraduate degree in optometry, and it's a 3-year undergraduate programme, full-time. Once the students graduate, then they go into a 1-year traineeship for the scheme for registration, and at the end of their 1 year, they take the examinations by the College of Optometrists, and they become registered with the General Optical Council. And they might spend their 1 year in either community practice, which is the majority of them, or in a hospital practice. And the university clinics are there to train the students whilst they're undertaking their undergraduate degree. So some professions would have that clinical experience or their practice experience perhaps out in the community whilst they're on their degree programme. But in optometry, there's very much a tradition that the clinical work is done in-house in university clinics. And the General Optical Council requires the students to complete 41 core competencies relating to their clinical practice. And of those 41 clinical competencies, 3 of them relate to visual impairment. The students need to demonstrate that they can take an appropriate history from somebody who's visually impaired, that they can measure the visual impairment and quantify it accurately, and that they can advise on optical aids and different ways of coping, different strategies for coping. So it's quite a small bit overall of the entire picture of their clinical experience. And the General Optical Council also sets down how many patient episodes the students must have. For example, they must undertake 18 standard eye examinations. And low vision's included in a number of specialist clinics. They don't specify exactly how many low vision patients have to be seen, but there are 12 of these sort of special episodes, of which some or all of those could be low vision patients. So I set up the low vision clinic back in 1986. We have a pattern, we accept referrals from any source, and mostly it's by word of mouth, and people just ring us up and ask to come along, which we're quite happy to do. We don't charge anything for any of the examinations that we do, and we loan aids to the patient we charge this £10 for each gadget for up to 3 months, which allows somebody to try out the aid to see whether it's going to be beneficial for them. At the end of that 3 months, they either return it to us, we may have exchanged it for something else in the meantime, as we've seen them and seen how they've been getting on with it. They can continue to carry on loaning and just paying their £10 as each 3 months, or they can buy it outright and we knock what they've paid in the loan fee off the cost of it. Or if they don't want to pay anything at all, we refer them to the hospital, and if possible, we try and send a letter to the hospital explaining what we've done to perhaps try and ease the process along the way. And our typical routine is to see the patient again with their aids after a couple of weeks to see how they've been getting on, and very often we do exchange things at that point, and we do add extra devices to the mix. And if we've issued anything new, we see them again after another 2 weeks, and we keep on going. We're quite happy to see people as many times. In fact, the more the merrier. As long as the patient's happy to come in and see us, then we're more than happy to see them as many times as required. And so if we take eccentric viewing and steady eye strategy particularly, I sat down and looked at the course that I teach and thought, where exactly does this fit in? The students do these clinical sessions every couple of weeks throughout the year, and for years in universities, think 20 weeks rather than 52. So they probably have 10 clinical sessions in that time. And they also have 20 lectures about low vision. And these assignments that they do 16 practical assignments, which is all about getting familiarity with different types of devices and different techniques. And they're included as part of these clinical sessions. As I looked at what the students learn about eccentric viewing. Now, week 0, which is the beginning of the year, like the welcome week, for people who are as old as me, it used to be called Freshers' Week, but that's not politically correct anymore, so it's Welcome Week now in the university. And in Welcome Week, in the third year, I must emphasise, this is not for first year students, it's a third year, final year course. We give them simulation specs with different sorts of eye diseases, and we send them off to do stuff. We send them off making cups of tea, walking across the road, navigating their way around, writing letters and things like that. And we have a macular disease one, and we have a diabetic retinopathy simulation. And they very quickly realise and volunteer themselves that if they find the right eye position and the right head position, they've got much better vision. And so that's their first introduction to the idea that vision's patchy, it's not the same everywhere, and there are ways you can get around it. But they say, oh, but it's not very much, there's only a tiny bit of it. So we've introduced them to the first bit of, this is difficult, but there may be ways around it. We have then their next probably encounter is with steady eye strategy. And they do an assignment with magnifiers with different fields of view. So they have some low-powered magnifiers and some high-powered magnifiers. And we get them to use steady eye strategy with all of those. It's actually quite tricky with a large field of view to do steady eye strategy if you've got normal vision. But what we find, what it helps to show them is, it's a really difficult thing to do. You have to think quite hard about doing steady eye strategy. It doesn't come naturally to you. And that it really only has benefits for very small fields of view and only being able to see a very restricted area at a time. That's where steady eye strategy really comes into its own. And that's hopefully just to show them what they're asking patients to do, that when they ask a patient to do steady eye strategy, it's not going to be instantaneous and easy. It's going to take quite a bit of effort from the patient, and they have to appreciate that. Having gone through it themselves, even in a limited way, is hopefully a good indication that that's what will happen. That we have a virtual learning environment where they can access a lot of electronic resources to help with their learning. And one of the things on there is me teaching somebody about locating eccentric viewing, their optimum location for eccentric viewing using an Amsler grid. So they get an introduction there to the sort of clinical applications. And then one of these 20 lectures, lecture 14, in fact, in the sequence, is helping patients with a central scotoma and eccentric viewing and steady eye strategy. Locating preferred retinal locus is quite an important part of that lecture. And I say that we have the clinical sessions, and so they would be involved in training for the patients where that was appropriate. Now, they wouldn't be doing it themselves. They'd be watching one of the clinical supervisors, who are all optometrists at the present time, doing that sort of training. Because it's a university environment and you're trying to teach students strategies that they be able to adopt, you really want to have some fairly rigid rules about when you do things. It's very hard for students when you say, well, it's just, you have to have the right feeling for it. So we've got to try and set some sort of fairly clear guidelines as to what we think is appropriate. And so when we're selecting who we would tend to offer training to, we would be looking for some factors that would have come out in the history that we'd have taken from the patient. So anybody who says that large print is just as difficult for them to see as small print, and that they really don't find any sort of magnifier very helpful at all, that's suggesting to us that this might be the sort of person that we're going to be training. If they actually report that bits of words are missing, or that they only see parts of things as they look at them, or parts of faces, particularly if they say that numbers are particularly difficult to read, because of course you can't guess missing numbers, you can guess missing bits of words sometimes. Or if they say that words seem to run into each other, that's again another good indication. And we observe the patient reading. If they start to move their head around or they're moving their book around, that's a good indication that they're trying to locate clear patches of vision. If they can read the first letter in the line, or they can read the first letter of the word but not the rest of it, or they can manage short words and not long words, that's another good indication. Or magnification just doesn't produce the effect you expect it to produce. And those sort of characteristics, we say, yes, that's the person we should be thinking about doing some sorts of eccentric viewing training with. And then, even if there's no sense of being a central scotoma, just somebody who's using a high-powered magnifier, and it's the magnifier which is limiting the area that they've got available to them, then the steady eye strategy would come into that. Also, some patients with tunnel vision or a hemianopia, which is a loss of one side of the visual field, again, steady eye strategy is a very useful thing for them to learn in some cases. And so what does the training involve for a patient that I would see? It's a variety of different things. Because it's being taught by the people who are doing the overall low vision assessment, it's really just integrated into that to a greater or lesser extent. So dispensing spectacles might be important for a particular patient if they're not up to date. A magnifier, almost always, we're going to be providing a magnifier for the patients that we see. Some perhaps just scotoma awareness, identifying particular directions that are clear, identifying whether their vision's patchy, and explaining to the patient why it's like that, and showing them the difference. I tend to find just asking the person to read a long word is often quite a good way to illustrate to them what's happening. So showing them a long word, relatively large print on a reading chart, and I'm saying, if you look at the first letter, what can you see? Can you see all the word at a time? Can you see just bits of it? And I say, well, how do you read the whole word? And they say, oh, I move my eyes along. So that's the introduction to saying, well, let's not do it like that. Let's think of a different way of doing it. Eccentric viewing on single letters to identify their locations. We talked about the 1 to 9, so clock face type of position. Then use that sort of strategy. Or looking at have stars printed above and below the words and asking them, do they see more clearly if they look towards the stars than looking directly at the words. And then moving into steady eye strategy and going on to progressively longer and longer words as they become more experienced. Regular homework, as Mr. Douglas described earlier, between the sessions to get used to that strategy. And then patient would come back after a couple of weeks to look at their eccentric viewing training and also to look at their use of a magnifier, because in most cases it does involve a magnifier as well. And the whole thing is sort of integrated together into that package rather than really being considered as two separate things. So supply of magnifiers as separate from the training parts of things. So hopefully I've described to you the way that we operate that model. It is a fairly unique model because it was created for a particular purpose. Hopefully we're offering very good patient care, but we're also trying to provide a learning experience for optometrists and really just to also raise awareness amongst optometrists that these sort of techniques are out there and whereabouts they can signpost patients to in order to be able to get this sort of training. Thanks very much.
Okay, as Christine just said, I'm from Visibility, which is a local society covering Glasgow and the west of Scotland, which is becoming larger by the day, it seems. We've recently incorporated with Dumfries and Galloway Society for the Blind, so they are now part of Visibility. And for people who haven't heard of Visibility before, we were previously known as Glasgow and West of Scotland Society for the Blind, but we've been Visibility for a few years now, and as an organisation for 154, and I've been there for most of that time, it seems. It was interesting to see the short film there with Isabel Haddo, one of our eccentrics. Isabel is a very, very formidable lady. She's the first person that I trained in eccentric viewing and eccentric reading techniques. She taught me more than I ever knew, but she came through the door incredibly motivated. And just something that I want to say straight off, that the people that I find who do best in learning these techniques are people who are well motivated. No one could have told Isabel that she wasn't going to learn these techniques. She just wouldn't have listened to them. She would have just gone and learned anyway. And it also reminded me, one of the stories that she was reading out there is an Australian poem by Tom Barker called The Crocodile. And the crocodile goes... Fred was a bit of a wanderer, and he'd often heard it said that he'd rather go a-fishing than lie all day in his bed. He'd get his tackle ready and chucked it all in the ute, and then with a nod and a whistle off to the creek he'd shoot. And a lady I worked with a few years ago was having tremendous difficulty with steady eye. Basically, she wasn't getting together with the coordination. She was finding it very difficult to keep her head steady. She wasn't getting there until she had a bad fall, and she came in, I think, to her third session with a neck brace on, and she said, "David, I've got it, I know how to do it." So the neck braces are certainly the way forward if you want to encourage steady eye strategy. But the point of that story is that she was reading that crocodile poem as part of her homework, and she said, "David, I know how I'm going to remember it from now on. I have to be like Freddy and keep it steady. I have to move the paper. That's the caper." And that's it. In a nutshell, that's a reminder of how to do steady eye. At Visibility, we've been running the New View project for about 8 years now. We were quite fortunate early days that we linked the possibility of setting up an eccentric viewing project with a local funding source, which was the Scottish Government, then the Scottish Executive's adult literacy campaign. And we argued the case with Glasgow City Council that there was a funding opportunity here. They had monies for literacies. We had a group of largely older people who were losing the ability to read effectively because of sight loss. And let's put the two together and let's see if we can set up this project. Some of the stuff that I'm going to say has been covered by Christine and other people earlier on, and will probably be covered by other people as well today. But again, we've found that on average over that 8-year period of time, that the length of time that it takes to train someone in the techniques is about an average of 3.5 sessions. Sometimes it's 1 or 2, sometimes it's 4 or 5. In a couple of occasions it's been 10, but that's a rarity, and that was many years ago. And again, we've moved from originally having sessions on a weekly basis to actually having sessions about once a fortnight, once every 3 weeks. That allows people time to go home, to practice their techniques, to think about what it is they need to ask you when they come back in next time. They then come back in, you can pick up any bad habits in technique, anything that they've got problems with. That seems to be a reasonably useful period to work with. Bearing in mind that the person must practice in between times, and you can always tell the person who sits down in front of you hasn't been doing the practice. But it's evident as soon as they sit there. Again, we have not necessarily in a clinical way, but we do record rough and ready reading statistics because it's a literacy-based project, albeit that was a flag of convenience originally. So we have to report back to our funders how our learners, as we call them, are progressing. And the measures that we've chosen to do that are their reading speed, their comprehension, and their ability to do everyday tasks. What we're looking at, bearing in mind it is eccentric reading we're talking about here, is we're looking at being able to do functional reading tasks, survival reading tasks. So being able to read small amounts of material for short periods of time, but perhaps often for long periods of time, or many periods of time throughout the day. You might only need to read 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. If you think about the reading that we actually do on a daily basis, it normally isn't that much. Unless you're sitting down and reading for pleasure or for research or for educational purposes, most of the reading we do is in small, manageable chunks. And we would normally set off with an individual learning plan for it, for each individual, negotiated with them of the type of reading tasks that they want to be able to do. Commonplace ones are being able to read church hymn sheets, food packaging, medications, that type of thing. Those are fairly common things. We deliver it again, not a dissimilar method to Christine's just outlined at the university there. And originally we offered people the choice, and somebody picked the word up, choice has been very pertinent earlier on, the choice of either having a home visit or coming to Visibility, and it's a sort of quasi-clinical setting. We have a training room. People would come and work with us in our premises. Advantages to both, I think. Advantage to home visits are the person very often is more comfortable than coming into a clinical setting. You can see how they're, for example, using light within their household. Are they sitting at a place that's conducive to using the techniques? Downside to home visits are the distractions, the dog running about, grandchildren that are being babysat, tendency for the cup of coffee and the blether to go on for 3/4 of an hour rather than actually you may only have an hour to do that visit. So there's a downside to both. When someone comes to Visibility, as a local society, we are interested, A, in the technique that we're trying to teach the person, B, we want to sell them our services, not physically sell them the services, but let them know that what we have to provide and what's available to us and what other services that we can signpost them onto. And quite often actually coming into our place is the best way to do that because we can instantly introduce them to staff and the social and recreation projects that we run, into home support projects that we run, that type of thing. So there's an advantage to that as well. One of the other reasons, just to skip back for a second, that we have to record information in terms of comprehension, reading speed and so forth, that's actually That's one of our funders' requirements for the funding. It actually produces a huge amount of paperwork, most of which I'm sure is never seen, but it's stuff that has to be done. That's coming to an end, unfortunately. We've lost that funding because the funder is now looking to more vocational-based reading projects, essentially aiming at younger people who have reading problems, trying to get them back into the workplace. And the fund itself is contracted. So we've lost that, and that's the downside. We've lost the money. There's a big hole in the funding for that. The upside is it's given us a chance to actually look at the model that we're delivering and the gaps within that. And certainly there are gaps within that. What I've always wanted to do, and have been doing over the past 18 months, is actually involve more volunteers in the training process. People with MD themselves who've been through our project and who actually want to pass on their skills to others. Now, we've now got a small core group and hoping to expand on that. And that's probably one of the ways that we're going to do a major expansion. It's becoming more and more difficult for us to have professional staff there on a regular basis providing the training. So we want to actually use our skills to train the trainers and roll that model out as well. Another way that we're looking at doing things with one local authority, we've been doing this for a year, and they're hoping to work with us over the next year as well, is the local authority sensory impairment team are identifying the people who are potential eccentric viewing learners. They will then bring me in, or my colleague in. We'll do an introductory session on what the technique's about, what's involved, what's expected of the person, and that's done to a larger group. So instead of doing the session with 20 one-to-one sessions, you're doing 20 people with one session, which is obviously a saving in staff time. But we want to tie that into the low vision services that are provided by that individual local authority as well. So what we'll then do is, once we've done an introduction session, we'll follow that very quickly with a one-to-one assessment with the person, and then a number of one-to-one sessions at a central venue. This wouldn't be domiciliary either. We'll then follow that on with a number of additional sessions on lighting and on glare management for people that have been through the programme as well. That's been promising with that particular local authority. It's worked well, and it's allowed us to get a fairly large number of people through in a fairly short period of time. So hopefully we can roll that out across our area. I think that one of the long-term advantages of having the New View project for visibility has been, as an organisation, it's increased our awareness of low vision issues. And that might sound strange for a local society to be saying that, but I think in the past we traditionally worked with people who were essentially blind, and now we're working with people who have low vision as opposed to no vision. And that's a huge amount of people, particularly people with macular degeneration, that we previously didn't work with, who didn't come to our services. So that's changed a lot over the past few years. And it's brought those people into visibility, not just to this project, but the spin-off to the other pieces of work that we are doing, and ultimately that's to the benefit of the visual impaired people, because they're accessing services that previously they didn't. Okay. Thank you.
I've been running low vision services in the West Country since about 1982, and always eccentric fixation and steady eye strategy has been an integral part of those services. The service I'm going to describe now has been running since 1994, when I changed employers and set up Optima and set up a new service. I've always been very dedicated to interdisciplinary working, because there's not one of us that can do the whole job ourselves, and so working with other people with different skills, that we can bring the whole low vision service together has always been something that I've been dedicated at doing. The service that we now run in Devon, the partners are Devon PCT, South Devon Foundation Trust, the Royal Devon and Exeter Foundation Trust, Optima, Devon Insight, which is the local voluntary society, Devon County Council Sensory Team, and Devon Care Trust Sensory Team. So our services, the low vision service on a clinic day is operated by 3 people, a vision therapist to do the low vision side of things. We'll have a rehabilitation officer in clinic in a separate room, and someone from Devon Insight who acts first of all as the meter and greeter, but also there's a selection of their equipment in the resource room, which doubles as the waiting area. So while they're waiting for their appointment, there's plenty of non-optical electronic equipment and just about anything, talking watches, the whole lot for them to be looking at. Then the therapist will take the patient after the assessment. The low vision aid will be provided on the day. We will have measured their lighting needs and requirements, and then physically we take the patient into the rehab worker and sit with the rehab worker and the patient for a little while, explaining exactly what we've done in the clinic, and if we have been teaching eccentric fixation, we will explain that that's been done and the position, the PRL angle, and I might say to the rehab worker, you know, if Mrs. Smith looks slyly at you, don't worry, I've told her to do that. So that's basically how we start the. What does the service? What is the package? The information and advice regarding the patient's particular eye problem. We know that, you know, with the best will in the world, a lot of ophthalmologists find it extremely difficult to explain a visual impairment in language that your average 80, 90-year-old can understand. Saying something like, you see, you have an edema behind your retina, usually goes in one ear and out the other. So actually explaining it in simple language, I always use the concept of wallpaper on a wall. So using anecdotal examples of that to help the patient understand what's going on. It's no point in trying to teach somebody eccentric fixation by saying the thing what you'll have to do is look above what you want to see, and you can see the brain switching. Well, how on earth am I going to see it if I have to look above it? Unless they understand why they've got to do it, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to learn the package. Assess and provide optical and non-optical low vision aids. Emotional support, well, we don't do that in our clinic, but South Devon Healthcare Trust does have a dedicated psychology from the psychology department to give support, emotional support. So we can refer to that one. And information and advice on other services. Eccentric fixation as part of this package, and I would always start by looking at if we're going to need to do eccentric fixation before even trying to do an assessment for magnification. And Christine gives some extremely good examples of when you would look at whether eccentric fixation is going to be required. The head wobble, the wobbling of the reading chart is a classic one. And if that's the case, if we're going to need to teach eccentric fixation, then we need to look at finding where that PRL is, or we may need to move to a TRL to be able to do that. So doing that first, working on the eccentric fixation before introducing magnification, in my opinion, is absolutely crucial, because without doing that, you won't get the magnification right in the first place. And sometimes you need to adjust the type of magnifier that we're going to give if you're teaching eccentric fixation. So that's quite an important part, in my opinion. And again, the steady eye strategy, which is important once they've found their PRL. Yeah, well, I've just said that. Assessing for eccentric fixation beforehand. So, for example, what I'm saying is, I mean, here's me using a monocular to read the laptop. Now, for example, if I've got a great big central scotoma and I say I need a monocular to see bus numbers, and we hand that patient a monocular and they look straight through it, I can't see anything, it's all black. You've got to have to teach eccentric fixation before they're ever going to see through a 20mm objective. So that's the kind of example that we need. So I personally would always start the assessment by using an Amsler grid. And a question came up earlier on about plotting the scotoma. I really wouldn't worry about that. Think about what we're after. We're after finding the PRL. We're looking for the best piece of vision closest to the original fovea. We're not really that terribly interested in the shape of the scotoma. What we're interested in is where's the best piece of vision. So an Amsler comes in very useful as the starting point. Look at it, find out where the healthiest piece of retina is closest to the original fovea. In this case, it's going to be up and to the left. Patient might say it's brighter, clearer up and to the left of the grid. Well, then we need to get the person to look below and to the left. Oh, now I can see the spot. Look straight at the spot again and it'll disappear, yes. Now look down and to the left. And keep doing that, keep practicing until you can find the centre of that cross straight away, first time, every time. And once we've done that, then we can take them back to print and say, okay, look at the first word. Can't see the beginning of the first word. Remember what you did to see the spot? Look down and to the left till you get that. And once you've got the beginning of the first word as clear as you can, don't move your eyes, don't move your head, don't move your magnifier, but move the text, let the text go through. So an Amsler is the first tool. The other tool that we use, either to confirm what we've done, or maybe if there's a multiple scotoma or ring scotoma, we might want to use a 1 to 9 chart. So here we go. Look straight at the chart. If you look straight at the numbers, look straight at number 5. If you look at number 5, that's gone back the wrong way. I've done 2 there, haven't we? Okay, wrong. If we look straight at number 5, what can we see? Well, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The middle bits, the right side of the reading span is missing. Now, would we want to teach eccentric fixation in that position? Maybe we need them to shift very slightly to the right, or we need to get that scotoma out of the way. In this case, by looking above. So now we've cleared up the right-hand reading span. Well, that is a much better position for somebody to read in than that position, because the words, when you're reading with steady eye strategy, the words are going to be popping up from behind that scotoma, which is really going to slow their fluency down. If we move the scotoma up and we've cleared the right hand of the reading span, yes, there's letters missing on the left, but think about it, you've read those words and then they've disappeared afterwards. So it's nowhere near as problematic to have it in that situation. And so there we go. When we're reading with steady eyes, see the oval as the reading field, and the print will go through that way. Assess for appropriate magnifiers. Assess for contrast sensitivity, because sometimes it's not making a difference in terms of just magnification, but we may need to use some filter to enhance the contrast, anti-glare filters as well, and non-optical aids. Often patients are saying, I can't see to sign me check, I can't see to write, and they're using the finest nibbed blue biro. And you think, have you ever tried thinking about using a black felt tip, for example, medium tip? It's not necessarily they need to have magnification to do that, but just just have their writing a little bit thicker. And the choice of low vision aids, I would always say it's the patient's choice. It's our job to find the right power magnifier. It's their choice then to find out which type of magnifier, and there's a whole range to choose from. So find the right power range in with that. And that's really what we call the 3 R's. There's no such thing as the best magnifier. It's the right aid for the right task for the right patient. And as I've already said, non-optical aids, you can't just get away with eccentric fixation and steady eye strategy and the magnifier. As we know, if you're going to read anything floppy like newspapers and magazines, a clipboard, task lighting is so important. Our statistics of referrals to our clinic, we would say that 1 in 7 patients referred to our clinic don't need any kind of magnification, they just need improved lighting. Typoscopes. Typoscopes can be quite useful if you've got somebody who's finding it quite difficult with their steady eye strategy. Sometimes it's so tempting because they want to start to saccade across the page, and using a typoscope in perhaps not a non-conventional way, having the aperture in the vertical. There's no way because you don't need you may not need a lot of magnification, therefore you're going to use a large magnifier, and therefore that patient's going to find it difficult to do steady eye strategy. Maybe if they're using, say, a 6 diopter 100mm lens, it's very difficult to stop using saccades. So we might use a typoscope in that position, because there's no way you're going to be able to scan looking through that aperture. So then you would use it to help with the steady eye strategy. In the early sessions, I'm not saying you'd use that forever and a day, just maybe for the first session or two. Raised desktops. So it's getting all the equipment together, and that's again why I would argue that it's very useful to work in a multi-agency, multidisciplinary approach, because all these items are available to use on the day. I mean, another example of one of my favourite little tricks, if I've got somebody who's got reasonably good acuity, doesn't need a lot of magnification, I'm just going to nip back to this one, is perhaps I need somebody who doesn't need much magnification, maybe could get away with a flat field dome magnifier, but they're having problems with holding their steady eye strategy. Well, one of my little tricks is to actually put some tape on the bottom of the dome magnifier to make it like a typoscope, and then they've got to hold their eye steady when they use it. And we'll use that for the first session and then remove it at a later session once they've developed their steady eye strategy. So there's a few of the tricks. And then obviously people quite often need more training, reinforce the training, 2-3 sessions. I think my record over the years was I did 7 sessions with one lady. But some people, it's very strange. Some people will get it straight away and be saying, why haven't I thought of this myself? Why haven't I just done this? And well, you bring them back for just a checkup, but perhaps they've got it straight away. Other people find it extremely difficult. Yes, you won't get everybody to use eccentric fixation, and there's all sorts of reasons why. And a classic one that I worked with, and I saw this lady on 3 occasions, and she could do it. She had a beautiful PRL, she could do it, but she didn't want to. And on the 3rd occasion, I went back through it, and yes, it was still, nothing had changed. And I said, look, if you practice, you could do this. And as long as you want to do it, as long as you're prepared to practice, I'm prepared to work with you. And I'd obviously backed her into a corner. And she said, look here, I know I could do it, but I don't want to do it. My next door neighbour comes in every morning at 10 o'clock and we have a cup of tea and she reads me mail to me. My youngest daughter comes on a Thursday and we do our local shop and we go out to a pub for lunch. And on a Saturday, my eldest daughter comes and we do our big shop. If they knew I could do this myself, I wouldn't see anybody from one week to the next. No, you've got to respect that. That's her choice. She could do it, but she didn't want to, and you've just got to accept that. As I say, our clinic is all under one roof. So we've got the resource centre, which doubles up as a waiting area. The bottom pictures are of the low vision clinic, and the counselling room, if you like, or the rehabilitation officers' room, where they can go in because they need to be private and maybe talking about finance and other things like that. So there it is, all under one roof. And our service, I think, runs pretty well. The advantages of a one-stop shop system, let me put it all out of focus, fiddling with it. Service all under one roof, multidisciplinary approach, ample parking, which always was a big problem when we were running this service in the hospital. Wide range of optical and non-optical aids available to issue on the day. And the great one, the daily communication with the other professionals, with rehab, with the voluntary sector, with the hospital. So we've got this constant contact, so we're all kept up to date of what's happening. And obviously the feedback we get when the rehab worker's gone out to see the patient in their own home, which gives us the feedback about the domiciliary lighting and all the rest of it, or Mrs. So-and-so's not getting on very well, so we better bring her back, or something like that. It makes the job worthwhile doing.
So back in 2006, the Society made a commitment that everybody with central vision loss should be able to access holistic rehabilitation and low vision services, which contained or linked with training in eccentric viewing and steady eye techniques if they chose. And the reason for this was the techniques were much more advanced in places such as Scandinavia, in parts of Australia and in parts of the USA, but were not as well known in this country. There were a few pioneers and a few people standing up for them, such as John, but they were not really so mainstream. And in 2012, while Helen mentioned this morning, things have improved. We are aware of excellent provision in some places. It certainly does remain patchy. And of course, with the demographic changes, the need for these types of services is going to, potentially triple within the next 10, 15 years. So still more work to do in terms of getting the techniques known and to enable better access for people. So during phase one of the model, which started in late 2006, we started training volunteers with macular disease themselves to be able to go and deliver eccentric viewing and steady eye technique training within their community. And we've worked very closely with Optima to develop our own training programme, which really fits the needs of us and the volunteers that we work with. And in our model, our trainers attend a 2.5-day residential course, and they are provided with training in the skills and the techniques, but they're also provided with some lighting, portable lighting, things such as ready readers and a toolkit which includes a lot of practice materials. And that at the moment includes an audio CD which can be left with the individual learner so that they can do exercises a couple of minutes a day to maintain their techniques. Our trainers then, when they pass the course, go on to conduct one-to-one face-to-face training in a community setting. And that can be within somebody's own home. It can be in a community venue. Sometimes our trainers hire rooms in the local blind society's offices. And sometimes it can be within the trainer's own home. It really depends how comfortable our volunteer trainer feels. And of course, as many have MD themselves, where they feel most comfortable, can vary widely. As Hugh demonstrated this morning, the sessions are usually about 3 sessions over a period of 3 months. And we anticipate that they would last about an hour a session, but as you heard with Hugh this morning, can last anything up to 2 hours, with lots of cups of tea and a bit of cake involved as well. And in our model, we also measure reading speed, acuity and fluency pre and post training, because these are the numbers that we can get on the page to prove the impact of the technique. So what difference has it made before the person was trained and then after the training? And our trainers provide handy hints and tips about lighting, magnification and contrast. And also they will signpost to either to the society or to other local agencies who can support that person with their needs. And we had an unsolicited article in the national press in 2007, and it resulted in 1,000 people phoning and registering to learn. So I think it was the Daily Mail that carried the article. And so for a small organisation with very few staff at the time, that was a massive challenge just in terms of answering the phones, but really does demonstrate the need that is out there. And also towards the end of our partnership, we started to partnership work with 3 local societies for the visually impaired, and that was Vista, who are based in Leicestershire, quite a large organisation, Northamptonshire Association for the Blind, and Merton. And they're 3 organisations who are very different in terms of size, resources and services. And so this enabled us to train some staff and volunteers within those organisations to see how they could deliver a model within their own, within their own organisation. And certainly Vista, it worked really, really well in that they trained over 70 people very, very quickly within, a few months. And we also started to work and pilot some training for sighted volunteers of our own, so friends and family of people with MD, because we were finding that some of our visually impaired volunteers did not have the geographical reach that we'd really like. And we also wanted to see if sighted volunteers would offer us different levels of service. And during the end of this pilot, we commissioned an independent academic evaluation by the Royal Holloway, and you will hear a bit more about what that evaluation found later on this afternoon. So in terms of the strengths of our model in the phase 1, we certainly found that because we were training people with macular disease to become trainers, this had a great impact upon them. They certainly found the techniques of eccentric viewing and steady eye very helpful for them. They also had a great empathy with the people that they were going out to train. So quite often, many of our learners feel extremely isolated, maybe don't know anybody else. If they're not linked into a group of ours, a peer support group, feel very isolated. Quite often they haven't talked to somebody about their vision and what's happening to it in a very long time. So to talk to somebody that's actually got macular disease and has been through the kind of same emotional journey. It also gave our volunteers with MD a really valued role within their community. They really felt that they could add value and play a really positive part within their community. And I don't think that can be underestimated in terms of how big an impact and of how much value that was to the individual trainers. Our evaluation demonstrated that there were improvements in visual functioning, and there were certainly some impacts, positive impacts upon quality of life. And as Jan's talking to you later, she'll go into that in much more detail. But it certainly showed that there, it was had some really good outcomes. We feel that a community-based model is a good model. Obviously, it has some it has some drawbacks. There are pros and cons to both models at the end of the day. But the fact that these trainers were in the community and could go and visit people in their own homes if that's what they chose was of benefit. And our doors open to any learner. As we mentioned, some of our trainers had a very limited geographical reach, so a very tiny area within a tiny postcode area. And that's understandable, really. But obviously it makes it very difficult when you're trying to match people, and if you're doing promotional work in a certain area and actually you can only cover a very tiny part of that, you're raising expectations and then not being able to meet need, which in itself is disappointing for all involved. We also found volunteer availability and some dropout, really. And again, not surprising, really, as a lot of our volunteers were older themselves, and obviously things in life change in terms of their own caring responsibilities, in terms of their own health, and in terms of their own vision. And certainly we've had feedback from one of our trainers whose vision is quite poor now, but she was saying actually I was frightening my learners when I was going around to teach them, because they could see how close I was holding things and how big I was making my writing, and it was quite distressing for the learner. So we'd rather not deliver the training anymore. And also the motivation and confidence of our trainers can sometimes be a bit of a weakness, particularly if they don't get to practice their skills almost immediately, and that may be because the person they're seeing actually just needs good lighting and don't need to learn the techniques at this point. And particularly if they're working with a learner who isn't motivated and hasn't been doing their practice exercise, and therefore the trainer can sometimes feel actually, maybe it's me, and am I doing things right, and it starts eroding their confidence to deliver the training. As we're moving into phase 2, we've renamed the model the programme revision, and we continue to train both people with MD and sighted volunteers to deliver our community-based model. We've also started working more with local societies and resource centres to deliver a model which suits them, really, whether that be in the community or whether it's based in their own centres. And this is because they're often seeing a lot more clients now with MD come through the door. And in terms of helping raise awareness amongst this client group that this might be a technique that can work, they've obviously got really first-hand access to them. We still measure reading speed, acuity and fluency pre and post training. And we are just about to start to measure the impact and outcomes which are related to daily living activities, so more about how this impacts upon a person's daily life. Quality of life as well, and we did do some quality of life in the initial evaluation, but we want to look at that a bit more. And we're also going to look at the economic value of the intervention. And we're going to be working with Christine Dickinson at Manchester University, who are in partnership with City Universities to do that. So we're very excited about that piece of work that's just about to start. In terms of our achievements to date, between 2007 and 2010, we've trained volunteers within England, Scotland and Wales. We don't have any presence in Northern Ireland, although we've been asked time and time again, when are we going to Northern Ireland? So it could be on the cards. We have about 100 active trainers at the moment. Since this presentation's been written, we actually think we've trained about 1,000 learners. I guess one of the difficulties that we also have with this programme is paperwork being returned through volunteers, and that's very common with a volunteering programme. We are signposting to external providers. As Helen said, we think we've identified about 50, but we don't know that we've got everyone. So I would urge you, if you are offering eccentric viewing training through whatever mechanism, please do let us know, so that should we get people on our register who we can't help, we will try and post them to someone that can potentially help them. And we've won a big health lottery award for this project back in 2008. So as we move forward for the next 3 years, we've identified 5 objectives, really. We still want to achieve that aim, that this is a part of an holistic package of low vision and rehabilitation support. We're still committed to that as an organisation. And we've identified 5 objectives for the next 3 years. That is to maintain our own capacity to provide eccentric viewing and steady eye services, so that's through our own volunteers. We are committed to working in partnership with other local societies and other resource centres and maybe older people's agencies to develop their ability to deliver the services. We still want to raise awareness of the benefits and the availability of eccentric viewing and steady eye amongst people with MD, but also amongst their family and friends, and amongst eye health and social care professionals. We are very keen to build the evidence base to influence practical change, and the first three objectives really are all about enabling us to gather good evidence so that we can drive through practical change amongst eye health, social care professionals and practitioners, amongst service managers and amongst commissioners. And we realise that if we, that's how we will achieve our ultimate goal, really, by influencing strategic change. And we are very keen to develop the infrastructure for eye health professionals and social care and rehabilitation workers. And that's through conferences such as this, but we also produce a newsletter on about 6 monthly basis, which is bringing together all the latest tools, the resources, new methods, updates on research. We have the great film, which you saw a clip of this morning, that's on our website and is available to you all. And by, funding things such as commissioning the literature review from Cardiff University and commissioning Christine and her team to look again at our programme and the evidence it produces. So we'd really like to hear more from you, actually. And if you are delivering training or of the techniques, please let us know and help us to improve our signposting. In your packs of materials, you've actually got a kind of a return sheet at the back of this presentation. So if you please complete it and leave it on your way out. Please link with one of our trainers locally or one of our partners, and we're happy to put you in touch with each other. Sign up to our newsletter and watch our DVD for professionals. And we're always really keen to engage with people from eye health and social care in the voluntary sector and with people from MD to hear about how we can ensure these techniques are well understood and well valued. And there's some numbers for you. So that's our helpline number if you want to find out more. If you know someone who might benefit from the technique and you'd like to put them in touch, or if you'd like to find out more about what it means to be a volunteer trainer with us. Our email box is, eccentricviewing@maculardisease.org. So if you have any questions or queries or want to find out a bit more, please let us know. And of course, there's our website there with the links to our pages, and you'll be able to link through to the professionals section in the newsletter there. So thanks for your time.
So all I really do is just briefly go through what Sight Service do, and then just briefly again we'll go through our training programme at the end. An organisation, we are a charity based in Gateshead. Unfortunately, we don't have the scope to provide eccentric viewing training to anywhere else. It's just within the Gateshead area, so we are pretty restricted. Amongst those services, we actually provide supporting people, which encourage people to remain in their own homes, increasing their independence. We provide community care assessments, CVI assessments and so forth. We do run a course, it's a vision support course called My Sight, My Future, whereby through about 8 weeks of training we more or less assess people to see whether or not they might be suitable for eccentric viewing training. Another route for individuals is, and it's a bit like John, we actually have our own low vision service. Again, unfortunately, it's restricted to just to the Gateshead area. We actually try to give individuals maybe a 2-hour session when they first come to us. What would happen is they would see the likes of myself or Michael or Dawn, and we'll work through from a rehab point of view. We will look at varying things. For example, we will look at realistic goals. We will talk about lighting, task lamps, colour contrast, everything applicable to and including what we would do through eccentric training. After this, basically what would happen is the people would then go and see our optometrist. Now, our optometrist can actually provide a mapping of the scotoma itself as well. What tends to happen is, and Michael's including down here, we use a logmar chart. And just to encourage the person to develop themselves and find out whether or not they need a training need, we use that logmar chart, specifically the way it's designed, to give us an idea where a preferred retinal loci can be based. But again, it more or less brings people out to the fore when we're discussing, because you will actually speak to people who are unconsciously eccentric fixating anyway. And that's the key for a rehab or optometrist to actually pick up on that. Occasionally we might actually go out to people's homes and we may take something out. People are aware of a pair of Max TV specs, whereby it's encouraging them to watch the television. However, they might try them and then say to us, well, actually, if I just look slightly above my television, I can actually pick out a better picture. So again, you're picking up on things when you're going out. Just like I say, sorry about this, I'm going through notes. We can actually provide equipment as well. Now, although our funding is restricted, we do actually get funding from our local primary care trust, which helps with this low vision clinic. And the way sometimes we juggle things about, we can actually provide monoculars, we can provide magnifiers, we can provide Max TV specs, but we also encourage the use through eccentric viewing of hyperoculars and ready readers as well. Again, I mean, as you'll see here, I mean, I've came up and John has mentioned your trusty clipboard. I'm never without my clipboard, and I will, if I can, give as many clipboards away as possible, because people do find them invaluable when they're sitting at home. And some, I mean, during the day, it might really be that they're reading the TV mag. Okay, we all know what these TV mags are like and how poorly colour contrasted they are. But however, with your little clipboard and a little bit of encouragement, and again through eccentric training, you never know what we might be able to achieve. It could be a case of after the appointment itself and within low vision, we might discuss with people, the optometrist might put one, and we will look at the likes of steady eye strategy. But again, we will actually cover colour contrast. Again, all the formats and all the equipment that leads us on to steady eye. It could be that after a number of weeks, we will actually go out to see the individual to see whether or not there is a need or whether there's a training course available. It may just be that the individual would just like eccentric training in their home. However, what we do try and encourage, and it's mainly to encourage their independence, is to actually get the client to come into the clinic. Now, I know on occasion it's best to work with the client in the home. We do look at both situations. However, if we can get the client into the clinic, sometimes their transport is paid for, but it encourages them to come in to see other people in a similar situation, and also it gives them an opportunity to see what sight service is like, because we do have other groups, low vision clinics going on. It could be that somebody might have slipped through the net and they haven't had a low vision assessment, in which case we can bring them in. Okay, now we have, like I say, there's 3 rehabs working currently at sight service. What Michael's actually done his notes here, I was in the process of actually training to be a rehab worker. And can I just say a little bit of crawling here as well. When I actually done my assignment on evidence-based rehab, I actually did it on eccentric viewing as well. So there's 1 or 2 people here, I won't actually name them, but I'd like to thank them because they actually helped me get a pass on my assignment. So thank you very much. The actual program itself, we've run a couple of programs. I do have some results here. Now again, you go from one extreme to the other. One group that I'll just briefly run through some stats. We've got some good stats here about pre and post eccentric viewing. But then again, like has been mentioned, you might get a group who have been using unconscious eccentric fixation, however still have a remaining part of the fovea that they can't use. But again, like people have said, we're getting them into the clinic, we're introducing them to services, we're making them aware of people who are out there, even though eccentric fixation is not for them. So just to run through, I mean, just briefly, like I say, just a little training program that we have. Again, we may actually map the scotoma prior to, albeit a little bit of a primitive method. We'll still do it with a pen and a bump on an AMSA chart, but it just gives you an idea. We will assess people, like I say, we mainly try and encourage the hands-free method. of using a hyperocular or a high plus ready reader. We have been known on occasion to stick with our magnifiers, with stand magnifiers, and possibly even using electronics at the time as well. From a comfort zone as well, we will use, I believe it was on the picture there before the film early on through the MDS, we will use the standard regression of size of font, but we also will try and do a little bit of background work on the individual to see what they like. So for example, we did have a client who loved Andre Rieu, so we actually compiled a little package together for them, so whenever they were reading, you could more or less, it would build up the accuracy format of what they were reading when you actually spoke to them afterwards to appreciate and find out whether or not they understood what they were reading. So just one little thing here. I mean, our best client out of a group of 4, at week 1, he was reading, I'm sorry to let this lady down here. At week 1, she was reading 93 words per minute on an Arial font of 12 with a 93.5% accuracy. By week 4, that had increased to 104 words per minute, decreased down to an Arial size 0.8, and then increased to a 98% accuracy. So it just goes to proof that eccentric fixation does work for some people. And then on an average over the whole group, the average starting point for the entire group was 44 words per minute, and by the end it was 49. The Arial font size has decreased from size 30 down to 17.5, and some individuals were actually reading 12.5. And accuracy had increased from 90%, 90.1% to 90.9. Not a great overall increase, but at least there was an increase there. Okay, and I think that's basically it, unless Dawn wants to put any more in that I've missed.
Well, if anybody has any questions, I was present at the first course that we did run, so I had the hands-on experience of presenting the course. Mike mentioned we did chart accuracy, fluency, font type at the beginning of the course, so we had a nice benchmark to start the whole process from, and we had a really nice evidence base there, as we've just demonstrated by the end of the course, of how effective it is, not just in terms of reading, but people just said to us, oh, it's great, you know, my independence is increased, I can read my own mail, I feel much more independent, and I don't have to rely, my business is my business again, and they just were so grateful. It was a pleasure to teach it.
It's just sorry, just one last thing. It's just pleasure to know and have actually people stand up and display results that we're coming across as well. I think it's great being here. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Everything that everybody said previous to us resonates clearly. Yeah. So if we repeated that, you would just get bored.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.